Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the dust-caked, sun-baked, absolutely grueling reality of ancient Roman farmers. Picture this. It's still dark. The air is thick with the damp chill of pre-dawn, and you're already stirring. Not from a gentle alarm clock, but from the insistent grumble of your stomach and the ingrained habit of relentless toil. Your small, rough cot offers little comfort, and as you swing your calloused feet to the dirt floor, you can already feel the familiar aches settling into your back and shoulders. No artisanal coffee here, no leisurely scroll through your phone, just the raw, undeniable pull of the land that demands your sweat and your very being. Honestly, you probably wouldn't last a day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes not to the soft glow of a bedside lamp, but to the inky blackness of a Roman dawn, punctuated only by the distant bleating of sheep or the rustle of some nocturnal creature. Your home is a simple, often single-room dwelling, perhaps with a thatched roof and walls of rough-hewn stone or sun-dried mud bricks. There's no central heating, no running water, and certainly no thought of a quick hot shower. The air is cool, perhaps even biting, especially in the cooler months, and you can already feel the familiar stiffness in your joints. Sleep isn't a luxurious 8-hour escape. It's a necessary, often interrupted, brief respite before the relentless cycle of labor begins anew. You rise before the sun every single day because the sun dictates your schedule, and the crops, your very livelihood, demand your immediate attention as you step outside. The first faint streaks of purple and orange begin to paint the eastern sky. The air smells of damp earth, of animals, and perhaps, if you're lucky, the faint, lingering scent of last night's cooking fire. There's no leisurely breakfast to prepare. A handful of dried grains, perhaps some stale bread, and a sip of water or watered-down wine is your sustenance, quickly consumed as your mind already races ahead to the day's tasks. Your muscles, though young or old, are perpetually tired, a deep, pervasive weariness that no amount of sleep seems to fully alleviate. This isn't the kind of tired you feel after a long day at the office. This is the bone-deep exhaustion that comes from constant physical exertion, day in and day out, with no real end in sight. You trudge towards the fields, your feet, often bare or clad in simple sandals, sinking slightly into the damp soil. The earth is your master, and your existence is entirely bound to its whims. If the rains don't come, your crops wither. If a pestilence strikes, your harvest is ruined. There's no crop insurance, no government subsidies to cushion the blow. Your family's survival hangs by a thread spun from the success of your labor. The tools you carry are rudimentary: a heavy hoe, a wooden plow perhaps pulled by an ox if you're fortunate enough to own one, or even just your own strong back and hands. This isn't precision farming with advanced machinery. This is brute force, sweat, and an intimate, often painful, knowledge of the land. Imagine the sheer physical toll. You spend hours bent over, weeding, planting seeds one by one, or harvesting mature crops under the scorching Roman sun. The sun beats down mercilessly, raising dust from the dry earth, making your skin burn and your throat ache with thirst. There's no break room, no air conditioning, just the relentless heat and the unyielding demands of the field. Your hands become thick with calluses, your nails perpetually caked with dirt. Cuts, scrapes, and blisters are a constant companion, often left untreated, risking infection in a world without modern medicine. One wrong step, one deep cut, could mean the end of your ability to work, and thus, the end of your family's sustenance. A common historical misconception is that all Roman citizens lived lives of relative ease and luxury, enjoying the spoils of empire. In reality, The vast majority of the population, particularly outside of major urban centers, were engaged in arduous agricultural labor. Their lives were far removed from the grand villas and public baths often depicted in popular culture. They were the silent, unseen backbone of the Roman economy, tirelessly toiling to feed the sprawling empire. You might think of the Colosseum or grand aqueducts, but the reality for most was a lifetime spent with dirt under their fingernails. As the sun climbs higher, beating down on your back, you might pause for a brief moment, wiping sweat from your brow with the back of your hand. Your eyes scan the horizon, looking for any sign of change, a cloud, perhaps, hinting at rain, or the silhouette of a neighbor, also bent to their labor. There's a profound isolation in this work, even as you are surrounded by others engaged in similar struggles. Each family's survival is their own fierce battle against the elements and the constant threat of scarcity. Now, here's a quirky little detail you probably wouldn't expect Roman farmers, especially those dealing with vineyards, sometimes used a method of training their vines known as arbustum. This involved growing vines up living trees, essentially using the trees as natural trellises. It sounds picturesque, but imagine the added difficulty of harvesting grapes from high up in a tree, perhaps having to climb with heavy baskets. This wasn't just for aesthetics. It was a way to support the heavy vines and protect them from ground pests and diseases. But it also meant your workday included a bit of arboreal acrobatics, adding another layer of physical challenge to an already demanding day. The sheer unpredictability of ancient farming was a constant source of anxiety. One year, a bountiful harvest might mean a small surplus, perhaps enough to trade for a new tool or a small luxury. The next year, a sudden frost or a swarm of locusts could wipe out everything, plunging your family into famine. You live at the mercy of forces far beyond your control, constantly praying to the gods for favorable weather, for fertile soil, for protection from blight. This reliance on divine intervention wasn't just superstition. It was a desperate plea for survival in a world where every meal was hard-won. Historians still debate the exact extent to which the average Roman farmer owned their land outright versus being tenants or dependents of larger landowners. While some certainly owned small plots, the trend throughout Roman history, especially during periods of expansion and the rise of large latifundia, large agricultural estates, often saw smaller farmers losing their land and becoming tenant farmers or even landless laborers. This would mean that even if you toiled endlessly, the fruits of your labor might largely benefit someone else, leaving you with just enough to survive. This complex relationship between smallholders and large estates shaped much of the social and economic landscape of rural Rome, often leading to significant social unrest. As the afternoon wears on, the shadows begin to lengthen, a welcome sign that the end of the workday is approaching. Your back aches, your muscles scream, and your mind is a jumble of exhaustion and the endless calculations of tomorrow's tasks. You might have seen the occasional traveler pass by on the nearby Roman road, a merchant, a soldier, perhaps even a wealthy senator in a litter. Their lives seem impossibly distant, a world of ease and abundance that is utterly foreign to your daily reality. You are, in essence, a cog in the vast machine of the Roman Empire, a machine fueled by the sweat and toil of millions just like you. One light-hearted moment in this grueling existence might come from the simple companionship of your fellow laborers. Perhaps a shared joke about a clumsy ox, or a fleeting comment about the absurdity of a new tax. These brief, unburdened exchanges are like tiny oases in the desert of your labor, offering a moment of connection and shared humanity before you return to your silent, solitary struggle. It's not laugh-out-loud comedy, but a quiet, shared understanding of your mutual predicament. As the sun finally dips below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of red and orange, you make your way back to your humble dwelling. The air cools rapidly, and the stars begin to emerge, one by one. In the vast, inky canvas above, there's no electricity, so the night is truly dark, lit only by the flickering flame of a small oil lamp if you're lucky. or the embers of your cooking fire. Your evening meal is as simple as your breakfast, more grains. Perhaps some vegetables, occasionally a piece of salted fish if you're near the coast and can afford it. Meat is a rarity, a luxury reserved for special occasions, or for those higher up the social ladder. The quiet of the night brings little rest for your mind. You worry about the next season's planting, about a child's persistent cough, about the ever-present threat of debt, or the possibility of a bad harvest. Your life is a constant, precarious balance on the knife edge of survival. You fall asleep quickly, not because you're relaxed, but because your body is utterly spent, collapsing into a deep, dreamless slumber born of sheer exhaustion. This cycle, this unyielding demand for your labor, is your inheritance, your destiny, and the foundation upon which the mighty Roman Empire was built. You wake with the same bone-deep weariness, the sun still a promise behind the eastern hills. The morning air is crisp, biting at your exposed skin as you stumble out of your meager dwelling. There's no hitting snooze on this alarm clock. The land, your animals, and the gnawing hunger in your gut demand your immediate attention. Your breakfast is a repeat performance of yesterday, a handful of coarse grain, perhaps a piece of flatbread, washed down with water or thin, watered-down wine. It's not about enjoyment. It's about fuel for the arduous day ahead. Today, perhaps you're tending to the nascent sprouts of wheat, carefully weeding by hand to give them the best chance against opportunistic competitors. You spend hours bent double, your fingers meticulously sifting through the soil, plucking out unwanted greens. The sun begins its climb, its warmth slowly spreading across your back, then intensifying until it beats down relentlessly. Dust rises with every movement, coating your clothes, settling in your hair, and making your throat feel parched. You try to conserve your water supply, taking only small sips, knowing that every drop is precious. The rhythm of your work is dictated by the seasons, a timeless dance between planting and harvesting. In spring, you're preparing the soil, plowing it with your ox if you're fortunate enough to own one. Otherwise, it's your own raw strength or shared labor with neighbors, breaking up the clods of earth and carefully sowing seeds. It's a period of intense hope and prayer, as you commit your future to the fertile but unpredictable ground. Summer brings the relentless weeding, the constant vigilance against pests, and the anxious wait for the crops to mature. You watch the sky with a farmer's wary eye, hoping for just enough rain, but not so much that it floods your fields. Imagine the sheer scale of the pests you faced. Not just a few garden slugs, but swarms of locusts that could descend without warning and devour an entire year's harvest in a single day. Or hordes of field mice, burrowing into your stored grain, contaminating what little you had set aside. You had no pesticides, no sophisticated traps. Your defenses were primitive scarecrows, loud noises, perhaps a hungry cat if you could afford to feed it. It was a constant battle, and often, the insects and rodents won, leaving you with nothing but dust and despair. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a matter of life and death for your family. A common historical misconception is that Roman farmers were mostly slaves. While slavery was rampant in Roman society and large estates certainly utilized slave labor, a significant portion of the agricultural workforce consisted of free smallholders, tenant farmers, and rural plebeians. These individuals, like you in our story, were legally free but economically vulnerable, often bound to the land by debt or tradition, and always at the mercy of the powerful elite. Their freedom often felt like a cruel joke when their daily existence was so precarious. Your tools are simple, often inherited, and meticulously cared for. A heavy, broad-bladed hoe, perhaps an aratrum, a basic wooden plow that merely scratches the surface of the soil rather than turning it over deeply. You sharpen your scythes and sickles yourself, the metallic rasp echoing in the quiet mornings. Every tool is an extension of your body, essential for survival. There's no mechanization, no easy shortcuts. Every furrow is carved by muscle, every harvest gathered by hand. As the day progresses, the sun arcs overhead, reaching its zenith, You might take a brief break in the meager shade of a lone tree, gnawing on another piece of dry bread. Conversation is minimal, mostly practical, discussing the state of the crops, the signs of rain, or the latest rumor from the nearest market town. There's a quiet camaraderie among you and your neighbors, a shared understanding of the unrelenting hardship you all face. You are all bound by the same earth, the same sun, the same struggle for survival. Now for a slightly amusing, though perhaps grim, detail: Roman farmers, facing constant threats to their crops, sometimes employed rather superstitious methods to ward off pests. One method involved ritually burying a toad or a dog in the field, believing it would deter rodents or insects. Imagine the scene: you, exhausted from plowing, now digging another hole to bury a dead animal, hoping it will somehow appease the agricultural deities or scare away the latest infestation. It speaks to both their desperation and their profound connection to the mystical forces they believed governed their lives. Your connection to the Roman state, for the most part, comes in the form of taxes. These are not always paid in coin. Often, you pay with a portion of your harvest, a percentage of your precious yield siphoned off to support the distant luxury of the urban elite and the vast Roman army. This is the bitter truth: your sweat and toil feed not just your family, but the entire machinery of the empire. You might hear whispers of distant wars, of new territories conquered. But for you, these events translate only into higher demands on your produce, or perhaps the forced conscription of a son into the legions. Historians still debate the exact impact of Roman taxation policies on the average farmer's economic well-being. Some argue that the tax burden, combined with fluctuating market prices for agricultural goods, often pushed small farmers into cycles of debt from which they could rarely escape. Others suggest that the Roman state, at least in certain periods, tried to maintain a stable rural population to ensure a consistent food supply. Regardless, for you, the tax collector arriving meant less food on your table, a tangible reminder of your place at the bottom of the imperial hierarchy. By afternoon, your body is screaming, your back is a dull ache, your arms heavy, and your legs feel like lead. The sun, now descending, casts long shadows across the fields, but it offers little relief from the heat. You push through the exhaustion, knowing that every row left undone, every weed left untended, will come back to haunt you in the form of a smaller, less bountiful harvest. There's no quitting time until the light fades, forcing you to stop. One moment of quiet contemplation might come as you watch a flock of birds circling overhead, perhaps a hawk hunting. It's a reminder of the raw, untamed nature that surrounds you, a nature that can be both provider and destroyer. You are intimately familiar with its rhythms, its beauty, and its brutal indifference. Your life is a constant negotiation with these forces, a test of endurance against the elements. As twilight descends, bringing with it a welcome coolness, you finally head back towards your home. The air is now thick with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke from the evening fires. Your body is a landscape of aches and pains, each muscle protesting the day's relentless exertion. Your hands are raw, your face smudged with dirt and sweat. There's no concept of unwinding, no leisurely evening. Your meal is simple, perhaps a porridge or a stew made from the meager vegetables you cultivate. It's sustenance, nothing more. Your children, if you have them, are likely already asleep, exhausted from their own smaller labors, or perhaps waiting for a brief moment of your presence. There's little time for stories or games. The demands of survival leave scant room for such luxuries. As you finally lie down on your coarse mattress, the sounds of the night creep in: crickets chirping, a distant dog barking, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Sleep comes quickly, a heavy, dreamless oblivion born of pure physical exhaustion. And as you drift off, you know that the cycle will begin anew with the first hint of dawn, forever tying you to the unforgiving earth. You awaken with a start, not to the gentle chime of an alarm, but to the insistent crow of a rooster or the frantic braying of a donkey. It's still dark. The air cool and damp with the lingering night. Your muscles ache in protest as you push yourself up from your thin sleeping mat. Every joint feels stiff, a constant reminder of yesterday's unending labor. There's no moment of leisurely contemplation. No checking the news. Your mind immediately jumps to the day's tasks. A mental to-do list that feels as endless as the horizon. Your morning ritual is stark in its simplicity. A quick gulp of water, perhaps a handful of parched olives, then out the door. The rising sun begins to paint the eastern sky with muted colors as you make your way to the fields. Today, you might be constructing or repairing a fence, a critical boundary between your precious crops and hungry wild animals, or perhaps even a neighbor's wandering livestock. Each post must be dug deeply, each branch carefully woven into place. A testament to your endless battle against the unpredictability of the natural world. Your life is inextricably woven into the fabric of Roman society, a tapestry where you occupy one of the lowest, yet most essential, threads. You are a pleb, a common person, part of the vast majority who fuel the empire with their sweat and blood. While the elite patricians live in their grand villas, enjoying elaborate banquets and political intrigues, your world is defined by the soil beneath your feet and the relentless demands of survival. There is no concept of social mobility for you. You were born a farmer, and a farmer you will die, just as your father and his father before him. The very air you breathe is a constant reminder of your place. When a wealthy landowner's carriage rumbles past on the nearby road, kicking up dust that stings your eyes, you barely glance up. Their world of silks, leisure, and power is a galaxy away from your calloused hands and aching back. You are a supplier, a producer, a silent cog in a massive machine that rarely acknowledges your existence, except when it demands your produce or your loyalty. A common historical misconception is that Roman society was primarily divided between free citizens and slaves, with little in between. In reality, the distinction between free and unfree was often blurry, especially for rural plebeians. While you might technically be a free citizen, your economic circumstances often rendered you little better off than a slave, tied to the land, beholden to powerful patrons, and with virtually no say in your own destiny. Your freedom was largely the freedom to starve if your crops failed. The legal system, if it ever touched your life, was a distant, often terrifying force. Disputes over land boundaries, accusations of theft, or unpaid debts could drag you into a world of complex laws and powerful magistrates who had little understanding or sympathy for the struggles of a rural farmer. Justice, for you, was rarely about fairness. It was about power, and you had very little of it. A wealthy man could easily crush you in a legal battle, even if you were in the right, simply through his influence and resources. Now, here's a somewhat grim but fascinating detail about how Roman farmers, particularly those in more remote areas, often had to handle justice themselves, or at least minor disputes. If a neighbor's animals constantly wandered onto your land and damaged your crops, you couldn't just call the police. Often, local custom, or even just a good old-fashioned shouting match, was the first course of action. In some cases, small communities might have informal councils or respected elders who would mediate. But imagine the simmering resentments, the constant vigilance required to protect your livelihood when formal legal recourse was so distant and inaccessible. It was a dog-eat-dog world, and your only real protection was your own vigilance and the strength of your local community. Your social interactions outside of your immediate family are largely limited to your fellow villagers or those you meet at the nearest market. These aren't grand social gatherings. They're pragmatic exchanges of goods, news, and shared complaints about the weather or the latest edict from Rome. You rely on these local networks for everything: for help during harvest, for shared tools, for advice, and for the simple comfort of knowing you're not entirely alone in your struggles. Historians still debate the degree of cohesion and self-governance within Roman rural communities. Some scholars argue that these villages had strong internal structures and traditions that allowed them to manage their affairs with relative autonomy from distant Roman authority, at least in daily life. Others contend that the pervasive influence of large landowners and the constant threat of state intervention kept these communities largely subservient and fragmented. For you, the reality is a mix. You depend on your neighbors, but you also understand that ultimate power rests far away, in the hands of those you will never meet. The passage of time in your life isn't marked by calendars or clocks, but by the turning of the seasons, the planting and harvesting cycles, and the slow, arduous growth of your children into laborers. Each year brings the same relentless grind, the same hopes, the same fears. Life is cyclical, repetitive, a constant battle to wrest sustenance from the earth. There's little room for ambition beyond the desire for a slightly better harvest next year, or perhaps enough to avoid going into debt. You might hear whispers of Rome's grandeur, the impressive public works, the vast armies, the wealth flowing into the capital. But for you, these are distant echoes. The roads that crisscross the empire, vital for legions and trade, primarily serve to extract resources from your land and transport them to the urban centers. You see the soldiers marching by, their armor gleaming, a sharp contrast to your dirt-stained tunic. They are the instruments of Rome's power, a power that ultimately rests upon your ability to feed them. One of the more poignant aspects of your social standing is the way disease and injury are handled. If you or a family member falls ill, there's no doctor to call, no local clinic. You rely on folk remedies, herbal concoctions, and the wisdom passed down through generations. A broken bone, a severe fever, or a deep infection can easily mean death. Or worse, a permanent disability that prevents you from working. The fear of illness isn't just a fear of pain. It's a fear of economic ruin, of your family starving because you can no longer provide. This vulnerability is a constant, invisible burden you carry. As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, you finally lay down your tools. Your shoulders slump with exhaustion. Your back a dull, throbbing ache. The dust of the day clings to your skin, a fine layer of your toil. There's no escaping the dirt, the physicality of your existence. You walk slowly back to your humble home, the silence of the fields broken only by the chirping of crickets. Your evening meal is simple. Perhaps a coarse grain porridge or a few boiled root vegetables from your garden. There's no feasting, no indulgence. It's purely for survival, to replenish the energy drained by the day's labor. As you eat, perhaps by the flickering light of a single oil lamp, you might look at your sleeping children, their small bodies a testament to both your hopes and your anxieties. Their future, like yours, seems destined for the same struggle against the unforgiving land. You lie down on your bed, the rough texture of the mattress, a familiar sensation against your tired body. The sounds of the night settle in, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustling of wind through the trees. Sleep comes quickly, a deep, heavy slumber born of sheer exhaustion. You dream, perhaps, of abundant harvests, of a life free from constant worry. But these are fleeting images. Your reality is the earth, and to the earth, you are bound. A humble servant in the grand, indifferent machinery of the Roman Empire. You wake again to the pre-dawn chill, the familiar ache in your bones a constant companion. Your stomach rumbles, a dull, persistent reminder that sustenance is not a given, but a hard-won victory. There's no time for self-pity or complaint. The day demands your presence, your strength, your unwavering commitment to the earth. Your quick morning meal of hard bread and water is swallowed without a thought for flavor, purely as fuel for the grueling hours ahead. As you step outside, the first hint of light is just beginning to soften the eastern sky. You might be heading to your small plot to check on the progress of your olive trees, or perhaps to tend to your meager vineyard. Roman agriculture wasn't solely about grain. Diversification was a key, if often precarious. Strategy for survival. Olives provided oil for cooking, lamps, and even basic hygiene, while grapes offered wine, a staple drink that was often safer to consume than water. But cultivating these crops came with its own set of challenges, demanding specific knowledge and even more relentless care. Imagine pruning your vines, each cut carefully considered, under the beating sun, or harvesting olives by hand, the small hard fruits requiring patient stripping from branches, then crushing them for oil. This wasn't a quick process. It was hours of repetitive, backbreaking work, often involving ladders or climbing, adding new aches to your already weary body. And after the harvest, the pressing of grapes or olives required even more labor, often a communal effort, using heavy stone presses that demanded immense physical strength. Your diet, for the most part, is monotonous. Think grains, mostly wheat or barley, ground into flour to make flatbreads or porridges. You might supplement this with lentils, beans, and whatever seasonal vegetables you can grow in your small kitchen garden: cabbage, onions, garlic. Meat is a rare luxury. Perhaps a scrawny chicken on a major festival, or some wild game if you're lucky and skilled enough to snare it, though hunting rights often belong to the wealthy landowners. Your protein mostly comes from pulses and, if you live near the coast, maybe some dried fish. This isn't about gourmet cooking, it's about calorie intake. You eat to survive, to fuel your body for another day of labor. Malnutrition is a constant threat, especially during lean years. Your teeth are likely worn down from chewing coarse grains and tough bread, and your body probably carries the marks of various deficiencies. Scurvy, anemia, and other conditions are not abstract medical terms. They are the lived realities of a diet lacking in diversity and essential nutrients. A common historical misconception is that Roman diets were rich and varied, like the elaborate banquets depicted in films. While the elite certainly indulged, the average Roman farmer's diet was remarkably simple, often bordering on subsistence. Fresh meat was rare, sugar was unknown, and many common staples of modern cuisine like potatoes or tomatoes hadn't yet arrived from the Americas. Your daily meal was a testament to the limited resources and the constant need to stretch every morsel. Healthcare, as you know it, is non-existent. There are no doctors in your village, no pharmacies. If you fall ill, you rely on the wisdom of an elder. Perhaps a local herbalist who uses plants and traditional remedies. Fevers, infections, even a bad cold, can quickly become life-threatening. A broken bone, if not set properly, could leave you crippled, unable to work, and thus a burden on your family. The fear of illness isn't just about discomfort. It's about the very real possibility of losing your livelihood and, ultimately, your life. Imagine a simple cut on your hand from a sharp tool. Today, you'd clean it, perhaps put on a bandage. In your time, that same cut, left exposed, could fester, become infected, and lead to blood poisoning, ultimately costing you an arm, or even your life. This makes you incredibly careful, even as exhaustion clouds your judgment. Every injury is a potential disaster, a roll of the dice with your very existence. Now, here's a slightly peculiar historical detail about Roman medicine that might make you wince: the use of spiderwebs to staunch bleeding. While it sounds incredibly unsanitary, ancient Roman texts sometimes mention using cobwebs as a poultice for wounds. The thought of sticky, dusty spiderwebs being applied to an open cut is certainly not comforting, but it highlights the desperation and lack of sterile alternatives available to people like you. It's a testament to the rudimentary nature of their medical knowledge and the sheer vulnerability of the average person to even minor injuries. Hygiene is also a constant challenge. There's no running water in your home. Water must be drawn from a local well, often shared, or collected from a nearby stream. It's used sparingly for drinking and cooking, rarely for bathing. Personal cleanliness is a luxury, limited to occasional trips to a communal bathhouse in a nearby town. If you can afford the time and the small fee, Otherwise, a quick rinse in a cold stream is your best option. The air often carries the smells of unwashed bodies, animals, and refuse, a constant reminder of the raw realities of ancient life. Historians still debate the overall health and life expectancy of the average Roman farmer. While archaeological evidence suggests that many suffered from a range of diseases and nutritional deficiencies, some scholars argue that a physically active, outdoor lifestyle, combined with a relatively unprocessed diet, might have provided some health benefits compared to their urban counterparts. However, the lack of modern medicine and sanitation meant that childhood mortality was incredibly high, and reaching old age was a rare achievement. The sun continues its relentless march across the sky, beating down on you as you toil. Your mind often wanders to simpler times, or perhaps fantasizes about a world where food is plentiful and labor is not a constant, crushing burden. But these thoughts are fleeting. The demands of the present pull you back to the earth, to the furrow you're plowing, to the weeds you're pulling, even moments of shared joy, like a simple gathering with neighbors after a successful harvest, are tinged with a cautious optimism. You celebrate, yes, but always with an awareness of how quickly fortune can turn. A good year might mean you can afford a new tunic or a small clay pot, but it doesn't fundamentally change the precariousness of your existence. You are never truly safe from the threat of scarcity. As the day begins to wane, casting long shadows across your fields, you finally finish your last task. Your body is heavy, each step a conscious effort. The familiar ache in your back and legs has deepened, a dull throb that will accompany you into your restless sleep. You walk back to your home, the air cooling quickly, bringing with it the familiar scents of your village. Your evening meal is eaten quickly, in the dim light of a flickering lamp. Conversation is minimal, often focused on the practicalities of the next day. There's little energy for leisure, for storytelling. You are simply too exhausted. As you lay down on your rough sleeping mat, the sounds of the night, the rustle of the wind, the distant barking of a dog lull you into a deep, dreamless sleep. Tomorrow, the sun will rise again, and with it, the relentless cycle of labor will begin anew. A testament to your quiet, unyielding struggle for survival in the heart of the Roman Empire. You rise again with the first faint hint of dawn, the chill air a familiar shock against your skin. Your body, despite the short hours of sleep, is already anticipating the day's labor. There's no soft bed, no gentle easing into the morning, just the insistent demands of survival and the rhythmic, unceasing pulse of the Roman countryside. Your breakfast, as always, is a quick, functional affair, a handful of dried figs, perhaps, or a chunk of yesterday's stale bread, washed down with lukewarm water. As you step out, the air is thick with the damp scent of soil and morning dew. Today, you might be undertaking one of the most fundamental tasks, preparing the land for new planting. This isn't done with large, roaring tractors. This is done with a heavy, wooden plow, perhaps pulled by a single, plodding ox if you are among the more fortunate farmers. If not, it's your own raw strength, perhaps hitched to a simple hand plow, digging into the earth yourself. Each furrow is a testament to your unyielding effort, your muscles straining with every step. Imagine the sheer friction, the resistance of the earth against the primitive plowshare. You lean into the harness, your breath coming in ragged gasps, dust rising with every turn. The sun begins to climb, and soon, sweat is pouring down your brow, stinging your eyes, your hands, already calloused and rough, tighten on the wooden handles, feeling the vibrations of the earth as it gives way under pressure. This isn't just tilling soil, it's a profound, physical struggle with the very ground that sustains you. In your world, true leisure is an alien concept. There's no weekend as you understand it, no clear division between work and rest. Every waking hour, from before dawn until after dusk, is dedicated to the demands of the farm. Even when you're not actively in the fields, there are tools to repair, animals to tend, fences to mend, and food to prepare. Your existence is a continuous cycle of labor, broken only by the necessity of sleep, and even that is often disturbed by worry or physical discomfort. When you do manage to find a moment of respite, it's usually born of exhaustion, not choice. Perhaps you slump against a tree for a few minutes in the searing midday heat, closing your eyes, trying to block out the insistent buzzing of flies and the perpetual ache in your back. These aren't moments of relaxation. They're brief, desperate attempts to recharge your utterly depleted body before the next task calls. A common historical misconception is that Roman life, even for commoners, was filled with public entertainment and leisurely pursuits in grand cities. While urban centers offered circuses and baths, the vast majority of the Roman population, like you, lived in rural areas. Far from these diversions, your life was defined by the relentless cycle of agrarian labor, with public holidays and festivals offering only brief, often exhausting, pauses rather than true leisure. Even the most basic comforts are scarce. Clean, potable water is a constant concern. You rely on local wells or streams. And while you instinctively know which sources are generally safer, there's always a risk of contamination, leading to debilitating stomach ailments. There's no refrigeration, so food spoils quickly, forcing you to consume produce soon after harvest or rely on preserved staples like dried grains, salted fish, or cured meats if you are wealthy enough to afford them. Consider the simple act of bathing. No warm running water, no soap, no soft towels. You might manage a quick rinse in a cold stream after a particularly dusty day, or if you live close enough to a town with public baths, you might, on rare occasions, spend a small coin for a communal dip. But for most of your life, personal hygiene is basic. And the pervasive smells of sweat, earth, and unwashed bodies are simply a fact of life. Now, here's a slightly uncomfortable, but historically accurate, detail about Roman hygiene. For the common person, urine was sometimes used as a cleaning agent. Yes, you heard that right. The ammonia in stale urine made it useful for degreasing wool and even for cleaning clothes. So, imagine not only the constant battle with dirt, but also the distinct aroma of your laundry. It really puts into perspective the lengths people went to for even basic cleanliness in a world devoid of modern conveniences. Your clothing is simple, practical, and worn until it falls apart. A coarse tunic, perhaps made of wool or linen, is your daily uniform. You have few changes of clothes, and washing them is a labor-intensive process, involving beating them against stones in a stream and drying them in the sun. Fashion, for you, is entirely irrelevant. Durability and functionality are your only concerns. Historians still debate the exact number of public holidays and festivals that Roman farmers would have been able to observe. While the Roman calendar was dotted with numerous religious festivals, it's unclear how many of these would have truly provided a day of rest for the average farmer, especially during critical planting or harvesting seasons. Many likely involved religious duties or communal feasts that still required significant effort, rather than simply offering a break from work. For you, a day off likely meant a shift in your labor, not an absence of it. Even your nights offer little in the way of true comfort. Your bed is likely a straw mattress on a wooden frame, or simply a mat on the floor. The chill of the night seeps in, and while you might have a rough wool blanket, true warmth is a luxury. Sleep is a necessity, a blackout period, not a time for rejuvenation. You fall into it quickly, utterly exhausted, and wake just as tired, ready to face the relentless cycle again. The simple pleasure of a warm, comforting meal after a long day is often absent. Your dinner is typically a continuation of your simple diet, more porridge, some boiled greens, maybe a handful of nuts or dried fruit if the season allows, and you can afford them. There's no varied menu, no anticipation of a delicious treat. It's simply sustenance, consumed in the dim light of a flickering oil lamp, or by the dying embers of your cooking fire. As the final rays of sunlight fade, painting the western sky in deep purples and oranges, you finally make your way back to your humble home. The silence of the fields descends, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. Your body aches with a profound, pervasive weariness that seems to have settled deep into your very bones. You lie down on your rough sleeping mat, the texture familiar against your tired limbs. The sounds of the night settle around you, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant howl of a dog, the gentle hum of insects. Sleep claims you quickly, a heavy, dreamless descent into oblivion. Born not of peace, but of utter, complete exhaustion. Tomorrow, the sun will rise again, and with it, the relentless cycle of labor will begin anew, binding you to the unforgiving earth and the indifferent march of the Roman Empire. You stir, not from a sense of well-being, but from the ingrained habit of a life dictated by the sun and the soil. The air is still cool, hinting at the warmth that will soon envelop the fields. Your body is a map of persistent aches, a dull throb in your lower back, a stiffness in your knees. There's no luxury of lingering under a warm blanket. The world outside your humble dwelling already calls. Your morning meal is the same unvarying fare: a handful of lentils, perhaps, or a chunk of last night's leftover porridge, swallowed quickly to fuel the arduous day ahead. As you step out into the barely lit dawn, the air is thick with the earthy scent of the waking farm. Today, you might be undertaking the critical task of maintaining your irrigation channels. In a land where rainfall is unpredictable, a reliable water supply is the lifeblood of your crops. You meticulously clear debris from the narrow ditches, ensuring that every drop of precious water from the communal well or nearby stream reaches your thirsty plants. This isn't a job for the faint of heart. It involves hours of stooping, digging, and scooping mud, often in the blistering sun. Imagine the frustration when a channel collapses, or when a neighbor diverts water illegally. These aren't minor inconveniences. They are threats to your very survival. Water disputes are common and can quickly escalate, sometimes into violent confrontations, because everyone's livelihood depends on this finite resource. You learn to be vigilant, constantly monitoring your water supply, knowing that a single oversight could mean withered crops and a hungry family. Festivals and religious observances offer the rare, fleeting moments of communal respite from your unrelenting labor. These aren't mere days off. They are deeply ingrained rituals, vital for maintaining social cohesion and appeasing the myriad gods and spirits believed to govern the harvest and the well-being of the community. You might participate in a local procession to honor Ceres, the goddess of agriculture, or offer a small sacrifice at a rustic shrine. These acts are not just about faith, they are acts of desperation, heartfelt pleas for a bountiful harvest and protection from famine. During these festivals, there might be simple feasts, often communal, where you share what little surplus you have with your neighbors. Perhaps a scrawny chicken is roasted, or a larger portion of grain porridge is prepared. These meals are a stark contrast to your daily subsistence, offering a rare taste of slightly richer fare. There might be simple music, perhaps a flute or drum, and opportunities for gossip and the sharing of news from the nearest market town. For a brief period, the crushing burden of daily toil is momentarily lifted, replaced by a sense of belonging and shared purpose. A common historical misconception is that Roman religious festivals were purely joyous and celebratory affairs for everyone. While they provided a break from routine, for farmers like you, they were also serious, often anxious. Rituals aimed at securing divine favor for the next harvest. The underlying fear of crop failure and famine was ever present, even during moments of communal celebration. These festivals are not merely fun, they are also important social events. You might see potential marriage matches for your children, or solidify alliances with neighboring families through shared ritual. The community becomes a little tighter, a little more supportive. In these brief moments of collective experience, it's a reminder that despite the individual struggle, you are part of a larger whole, bound by shared traditions and mutual dependence. Now, here's a somewhat charming, if slightly naive, detail about Roman agricultural practices. Farmers sometimes placed small statues or effigies of agricultural deities, like Priapus, a fertility god known for his exaggerated phallus, in their fields. These weren't just decorative, They were believed to ward off evil and ensure a good harvest. So, amidst your backbreaking labor, you might occasionally cast a glance at a rather anatomically exaggerated statue, hoping it's doing its job to protect your precious crops. It's a testament to the blend of practical knowledge and deep superstition that characterized ancient farming. The simple joys of life are found in these small moments: the taste of a freshly ripened fig, the warmth of the sun on your skin after a cold morning, the laughter of your children, even if fleeting. You learn to appreciate these small blessings, knowing how quickly they can be snatched away by drought, disease, or debt. True happiness isn't a goal, it's a series of momentary respites from hardship. Historians still debate the true extent to which Roman farmers felt connected to the grand narrative of the Roman Empire versus their immediate local community and family. While state-sponsored cults and imperial propaganda were certainly present, the daily realities of survival likely meant that local deities, ancestral spirits, and community traditions held more immediate significance for you than the distant emperor or the vast Roman pantheon. Your world was your village, your family, and your small plot of land. As the day wears on, and the sun begins its slow descent, your body is once again protesting. You've cleared the irrigation channels, perhaps repaired a leaky section, and now you make your way back from the fields, dust caking your skin and a familiar ache settling into your lower back. The shadows lengthen, bringing a welcome coolness to the air. Your evening ritual is as simple and unvarying as your mornings. A frugal meal, perhaps some leftover boiled vegetables, eaten in the dim light of your home. Conversation, if any, is practical and brief. There's little energy left for leisure or entertainment. As the last embers of your small cooking fire die down, you prepare for bed. You lie down on your coarse sleeping mat, the familiar sounds of the Roman night filling the air, the chirping of crickets, the distant howl of a dog, the gentle rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Sleep comes quickly, a deep, heavy curtain drawing over your conscious mind, a welcome escape from the day's relentless demands. You drift into oblivion, utterly exhausted, knowing that the sun will soon rise, signaling the beginning of another unyielding day, binding you to the land in a perpetual cycle of toil and hope. You are roused from your deep, exhausted sleep by the familiar sounds of the farm awakening the distant lowing of an ox, the first chirping birds, and the subtle, creeping light of pre-dawn. Your body, despite the night's rest, is still heavy with the lingering fatigue of days, weeks, and years of unrelenting labor. There's no soft mattress to ease your limbs. The hard earth beneath your thin mat has molded to your form over countless nights. Your morning sustenance is a swift, almost unconscious act, a piece of dried fruit or a handful of parched grains, swallowed without ceremony to prepare for the inevitable demands of the day. As you emerge into the cool morning air, the landscape is still veiled in shadow, slowly revealing the familiar contours of your meager fields. Today, your focus is on your precious livestock. If you are fortunate enough to possess any, a few sheep for wool and occasional meat, a goat for milk, perhaps an ox or a donkey for plowing and transport. These animals are not pets. They are critical assets, representing a significant portion of your family's wealth and a vital component of your survival. Their health and well-being are paramount, demanding constant vigilance and tireless care. Imagine leading your ox to the small, muddy watering hole, ensuring it drinks enough before the day's heat sets in, or carefully mending a tear in the sheep pen, knowing that a single escape could mean the loss of valuable wool or even the animal itself to a hungry wolf or opportunistic thief. You collect their meager droppings, a precious resource that will be returned to the soil as fertilizer, an endless cycle of taking and giving back to the earth. Their ailments are your worries, their hunger your burden. You might attempt to treat a sick animal with rudimentary folk remedies, praying to the gods that it recovers, for losing an animal could be catastrophic for your family's already precarious existence. The tools of your trade are remarkably simple, reflecting centuries of unbroken tradition. Your hoe is heavy, its wooden handle smooth from countless hours of use, its iron blade dulled but effective. Your plow, if you have one, is a basic wooden implement designed to scratch the surface of the soil rather than turn it deeply, requiring repeated passes to prepare the ground for planting. You wield these tools not with effortless grace, but with a deep, ingrained knowledge of their weight, their balance, and the most efficient way to coax the earth into yielding its bounty. There's no power machinery, no automated systems. Every furrow in your field, every planted seed, every harvested stalk of grain is the direct result of human and animal muscle. This isn't just work. It's a profound physical conversation with the land, a testament to raw endurance. You spend hours meticulously sharpening your scythes and sickles, the rhythmic rasp of metal against stone, a familiar sound in your small compound. A blunt tool is an inefficient tool, and inefficiency means more labor, less yield, and greater hardship. A common historical misconception is that Roman agriculture was technologically advanced, while the Romans were brilliant engineers in other fields. Agricultural tools and techniques remained surprisingly rudimentary for centuries, relying heavily on manual labor and simple implements passed down through generations. Innovations were slow to adopt, particularly for small-scale farmers like you, who lacked the capital for new methods. Consider the sheer physical toll of using these tools for an entire lifetime. Your hands are calloused, thick, and permanently stained with the earth. Your back is perpetually stiff, your shoulders rounded from hours of bending. Your knees ache, and your joints creak with every movement. Your body is not just tired, it is fundamentally shaped by the constant, repetitive strain of agricultural labor. This isn't a temporary soreness, it's a deep, pervasive weariness that is part of your very being. Now, for a slightly curious detail about Roman farming technology, the Gallic ard, or wheelless plow, was actually quite prevalent. It was a simple, scratch plow that didn't invert the soil but merely made a furrow. This meant farmers often had to cross-plow their fields multiple times, first one direction, then perpendicular to it, to properly break up the soil. So, imagine doing twice or more the plowing work you might assume, just to prepare a field. It highlights the sheer inefficiency that ancient farmers had to overcome with brute force and persistence. Your knowledge of farming is entirely practical, passed down orally from your ancestors. You learn to read the signs of the weather in the sky, to feel the texture of the soil in your hands, to understand the subtle cues of your animals. There are no agricultural schools, no printed manuals. Your education is the land itself, and your teachers are the generations of farmers who have toiled before you. This knowledge is your most valuable asset, meticulously acquired and carefully guarded. Historians still debate the degree of innovation in Roman agricultural tools and practices over time. While major technological breakthroughs were rare, there was a continuous, incremental improvement in methods and minor adjustments to existing tools. However, for the average farmer, these changes were often slow to trickle down, and tradition and immediate necessity usually trumped radical experimentation. As the sun climbs higher, beating down on your fields, you might pause for a moment, wiping sweat from your brow. You watch your ox, its plodding pace a mirror of your own slow, deliberate movements. The rhythm of your work is hypnotic, a monotonous cycle that demands patience and an unyielding will. There's a certain grim satisfaction in seeing a freshly plowed field, the dark earth turned and ready, a promise of future sustenance. One small moment of satisfaction might come from seeing a tool you've personally repaired hold up to the strain of the day. Perhaps you've rehafted a broken hoe or patched a worn harness. These small victories against entropy are meaningful, saving you precious resources and ensuring your continued ability to work. It's a quiet pride in your craftsmanship, a testament to your resourcefulness in a world of scarcity. As the afternoon wears on and the shadows begin to lengthen, you complete your last task for the day. Your body is heavy, each muscle protesting the relentless work. You lead your animals back to their pens, ensuring they are fed and watered. Their comfort a direct reflection of your own future well-being. Back at your humble dwelling, the simple evening meal is consumed in relative silence. There's little energy for conversation, just the shared exhaustion among your family. As the last embers of your cooking fire die down, and the dim light of your oil lamp casts long shadows on the walls. You prepare for bed. You lie down on your coarse sleeping mat, the familiar sounds of the Roman night filtering through the thin walls, the distant bark of a dog, the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, the chirping of crickets. Sleep claims you quickly, a heavy, dreamless oblivion born of sheer physical exhaustion. You drift into unconsciousness, knowing that with the first light of dawn, the unrelenting cycle of labor will begin anew, forever binding you to the unforgiving land and the simple, brutal tools of your trade. You stir from a fitful sleep, the lingering aches from yesterday's toil already a familiar presence in your limbs. The pre-dawn air is cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke. There's no soft awakening, no gentle transition into the day. The persistent gnawing in your stomach and the ingrained discipline of your life pull you from your rough sleeping mat. Your breakfast is a swift, almost ritualistic intake of yesterday's leftover grains, providing just enough fuel for the relentless demands ahead. As you step outside, the first faint blush of light touches the eastern horizon, slowly revealing the contours of your meager fields. Today, you might be undertaking one of the most terrifying, yet common, aspects of a Roman farmer's life: dealing with debt. The specter of debt hangs over you like a perpetual storm cloud, a silent, pervasive threat that can strip you of everything you own and plunge your family into an even deeper abyss of servitude. Imagine a bad harvest, perhaps due to an unexpected drought or a sudden pestilence. Your yield is meager, barely enough to feed your family, let alone provide a surplus for sale or tax payment. To survive, you must borrow. You approach a wealthier neighbor, a local merchant, or perhaps even a minor Roman official, desperate for a loan of grain, tools, or even a few coins. The terms are often brutal high interest rates, repaid in labor or a portion of your next harvest. You are entering a trap, a cycle that is incredibly difficult to escape. The fear of defaulting on a loan is a constant, suffocating anxiety. If you cannot pay, your land, your animals, or even your children could be forfeited. Debt slavery, though less common in later Roman periods for Roman citizens, was still a very real threat in various forms of economic bondage. You could be forced to work off your debt for years, becoming a virtual slave to your creditor, losing your autonomy and dignity. This isn't just about financial ruin, it's about the potential loss of your very freedom, the complete dismantling of your family's future. A common historical misconception is that Roman law always protected the small farmer from the wealthy. While some laws were theoretically in place to prevent extreme exploitation, in practice, the power imbalance was immense. Wealthy creditors often held significant influence over local magistrates, making it incredibly difficult for a small farmer like you to seek fair redress. Justice was often a luxury afforded to those with power and money, not to the desperate and indebted. You try desperately to avoid debt. You work harder, stretching every resource, foregoing even the smallest comforts. You mend your own tools, make your own clothes, and eat only what you absolutely must. Every decision is a calculation, a careful balance between immediate survival and the looming threat of financial ruin. The pressure is immense, a constant weight on your shoulders, shaping every action, every thought. Now, for a slightly grim but historically fascinating detail about how Roman law dealt with debt: the 12 tables. Ancient Roman law codes famously included provisions that allowed a creditor to seize and even sell a debtor into slavery if the debt was not repaid. While this was later softened for Roman citizens, the underlying principle of extreme legal power over debtors remained, influencing various forms of economic servitude. It paints a stark picture of the brutal consequences of financial failure. The debt extends beyond mere money. You might be indebted to a powerful local patronus, a wealthy landowner who offers protection or resources in exchange for your loyalty and labor. This patron-client relationship is pervasive in Roman society, especially in rural areas. While it offers a semblance of security, a powerful figure to turn to in times of crisis, it also means you are perpetually beholden to someone else, your choices and actions dictated by their will. Your freedom even if legally granted, is constantly constrained by these invisible chains of dependency. Historians still debate the precise nature and extent of nexum, an archaic Roman legal concept of debt bondage, and how it evolved over time. While explicit nexum may have declined, various forms of informal debt servitude and client relationships continued to bind poor farmers to wealthier individuals, demonstrating that economic vulnerability could often be as coercive as outright slavery. For you, the legal technicalities don't matter as much as the daily reality you are not truly free. The feeling of desperation can be overwhelming. You look at your children, their innocent faces a constant reminder of why you fight so hard, why you endure. You want a better life for them, a life free from the constant shadow of debt. But the cycle is difficult to break. A son might be forced to serve in the Roman legions to earn enough money to clear a family debt, or a daughter might be married off to a wealthier family in exchange for a loan. Your family's future is constantly mortgaged against your present struggles. One fleeting moment of hope might come when you manage to sell a small surplus at the market, enough to pay off a small portion of your debt. The relief, though temporary, is palpable, a brief easing of the crushing weight on your chest. But you know it's only a reprieve, a battle won in a war that continues endlessly. As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the western sky in hues of orange and purple, you finally lay down your tools. Your body is heavy, each muscle protesting the relentless work. The anxieties of the day, particularly those related to your financial precariousness, swirl in your mind. You walk slowly back to your humble home, the silence of the fields broken only by the chirping of crickets. Your evening meal is eaten quickly, in the dim light of your flickering lamp. There's little energy for leisure, for storytelling. The unspoken worries hang in the air, a shared burden among your family. As the last embers of your cooking fire die down, you prepare for bed, the fear of debt, a cold knot in your stomach. You lie down on your coarse sleeping mat, the familiar sounds of the Roman night filtering through the thin walls, the distant bark of a dog, the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, the chirping of crickets. Sleep claims you quickly, a heavy, dreamless oblivion born of sheer, physical exhaustion, punctuated perhaps by brief, anxiety-ridden nightmares of lost land and crushing obligations. You drift into unconsciousness, knowing that with the first light of dawn, the unrelenting cycle of labor and the ever-present threat of debt will begin anew, binding you to the unforgiving land and the indifferent march of the Roman Empire. You stir, not gently, but with the immediate, visceral awareness of the cold, hard earth beneath you. The pre-dawn darkness still clings to the edges of your small dwelling, but the first faint stirrings of the farm animals signal the inevitable arrival of another day. Your body protests, a cacophony of aches and stiffness, but there's no time for indulgence. Your quick, unceremonious breakfast of rough bread and diluted wine provides the bare minimum of energy for the relentless hours ahead. As you step out, the air is thick with the damp scent of soil and the promise of a rising sun. Today, your toil is tinged with the distant roar of the Roman Empire, a sound that doesn't reach your ears directly but reverberates through your life in tangible ways. You are part of the silent engine that fuels Rome's vast expansion, your sweat and labor directly contributing to the conquest and administration of new territories. While emperors and generals plot grand strategies, your field is the true battleground, and your crops, the spoils of war. Imagine the sudden arrival of Roman soldiers, not to protect you, but to requisition a portion of your meager harvest for their distant campaigns. Or the conscription of a young man from your village, perhaps your own son, forced to abandon the plow for the sword, his future uncertain. Roman expansion, for you, is not a glorious tale of victory, but a source of increased taxation, disrupted markets, and the constant threat of losing your vital labor force. Your life is directly impacted by the political and military ambitions of a distant capital. The construction of new Roman roads, while seemingly beneficial for trade, often means that your small, isolated community becomes more accessible to tax collectors. merchants, and soldiers. These roads, marvels of engineering, primarily serve the empire's strategic and economic interests, not necessarily your daily convenience. They are arteries that drain resources from the countryside, delivering them to the urban centers and military outposts, leaving you with less. A common historical misconception is that Roman expansion uniformly benefited all Roman citizens. In reality, the economic consequences were highly uneven. While some wealthy landowners and merchants profited immensely from new territories and increased trade, smaller farmers often faced increased competition from large, slave-worked estates, higher taxes to fund wars, and the disruption of local economies. Your life exemplifies the hidden costs of empire. The influx of cheap grain from newly conquered territories, particularly from fertile regions like Egypt or North Africa, could dramatically depress local grain prices. This sounds beneficial on the surface, but for you, a producer, it meant that your hard-won harvest fetched less at market. Your income, already meager, dwindled, making it even harder to meet your obligations and survive. This economic ripple effect, though distant, hit you directly in your ability to feed your family. Now, for a slightly disheartening but historically accurate detail, Roman soldiers, particularly during longer campaigns, often demanded food and supplies directly from local populations in the areas they traversed or occupied. This wasn't always a formal purchase. Sometimes it was a requisition, essentially a demand, leaving you with little recourse and even less to feed your own family. Imagine working tirelessly to produce food, only to have it forcibly taken for a distant war effort that offers you no direct benefit. It was a constant reminder of the empire's power and your own powerlessness. The sheer scale of Rome's military machine required an immense and continuous supply of food, equipment, and manpower. Your farm, however small, was a tiny but essential part of this vast logistical network. You are a silent contributor to the might of the legions, a producer for an empire that demands, but rarely truly gives back to, those like you. Historians still debate the exact long-term economic impact of Roman large estates latifundia, often worked by slaves, on the free small farmer. Some argue that the competition from these massive, often more efficient, operations slowly drove smaller landholders into poverty and eventually off their land, contributing to urbanization and the growth of the landless poor. Others suggest that regional variations and different agricultural specializations allowed some small farmers to persist. For you, the visible reality is that wealth is consolidating, and your struggle feels increasingly isolated against powerful forces. Even the spread of Roman culture, the Latin language, and Roman law, while shaping the empire, often felt distant and irrelevant to your daily grind. You might pick up a few Latin phrases, but your primary language is likely the local dialect. The intricacies of Roman law concern you only when they directly impact your land or your person, usually to your disadvantage. Your world remains local, bound by the rhythms of the earth, far removed from the grand narratives of imperial Rome. One small ironic moment might come from hearing tales of distant, exotic goods brought back from newly conquered lands, spices, silks, strange animals. These luxuries are utterly beyond your comprehension. A world of unimaginable wealth that feels like a cruel joke compared to your daily struggle for a handful of grain. You produce the very food that enables such distant trade, yet you never taste its fruits. As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the western sky in hues of orange and purple, you finally lay down your tools. Your body is heavy, each muscle protesting the relentless work. The distant echoes of the empire's might feel heavier tonight, a burden rather than a source of pride. You walk slowly back to your humble home, the silence of the fields broken only by the chirping of crickets. Your evening meal is eaten quickly, in the dim light of your flickering lamp. There's little energy for leisure, for storytelling. The unspoken worries about taxes, requisitions, and the constant drain of war hang heavy in the air. As the last embers of your cooking fire die down, You prepare for bed, the weight of the empire, invisible but pervasive, pressing down upon you. You lie down on your coarse sleeping mat. The familiar sounds of the Roman night filtering through the thin walls, the distant bark of a dog, the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, the chirping of crickets. Sleep claims you quickly, a heavy, dreamless oblivion born of sheer physical exhaustion, punctuated perhaps by brief, anxious visions of marching legions and demanding tax collectors. You drift into unconsciousness, knowing that with the first light of dawn, the unrelenting cycle of labor, forever tied to the grand, indifferent machinery of Roman expansion, will begin anew. You stir, not gently, but with the immediate, raw awareness of your physical state. The pre-dawn dark still clings, but the familiar sounds of the farm animals and the subtle shift in the air tell you dawn is not far off. Your body is a landscape of aches, a dull thrumming from years of ceaseless labor. There's no soft bed to linger in, no gentle easing into the day. Just the persistent demands of survival and the ingrained rhythm of a life bound to the earth. Your morning meal, if you can call it that, is a quick, almost unconscious act, a few handfuls of yesterday's coarse grain, perhaps, or some dried fruit, swallowed quickly to fuel the arduous hours ahead. As you step out into the nascent light, the air is thick with the damp, cool scent of soil and the promise of another sun-drenched day. Today, you might be undertaking the final, most crucial task of the agricultural cycle, the harvest. This is the culmination of all your efforts, all your worries, all your prayers. It is the moment of truth, when the earth finally yields its bounty, or cruelly withholds it. The intensity of the work is immense, a race against time and the elements to gather your precious crops before they are lost to rot, pests, or a sudden storm. Imagine bending for hours, your back screaming in protest, as you cut ripened stalks of wheat with a simple sickle. Each swath requires precision, strength, and an almost rhythmic motion, repeated thousands upon thousands of times. The sun, as it climbs higher, beats down relentlessly, raising dust that coats your skin and fills your lungs. Your hands are raw, often cut by the sharp blades or the brittle stalks. The work is continuous, often stretching from before dawn until long after sunset, fueled by sheer desperation and the hope of a good yield. This isn't just about collecting food, it's about securing your survival for the entire year ahead. Every basket filled, every bundle tied, is a tangible step away from hunger, a small victory against the constant threat of scarcity. Children, even the very young, are pressed into service, their small hands helping to gather stray stalks or carry lighter loads. The entire family works as a single, exhausted unit, driven by the primal need to provide. A common historical misconception is that Roman harvests were efficient and technologically advanced. While some large estates experimented with early reaping machines, the vast majority of harvests, especially for small farmers, were done entirely by hand, using simple sickles and scythes. This meant the process was incredibly labor-intensive, time-consuming, and highly dependent on the sheer number of hands available. The threat of a sudden rainstorm during harvest is terrifying. A single heavy downpour could flatten fields, cause grain to rot, or make it impossible to thresh. You constantly watch the sky, your heart sinking at the sight of dark clouds, praying to the gods for clear weather, just a few more days, just a few more hours. The anxiety is palpable, a constant knot in your stomach, until every last grain is safely stored away. Now, for a peculiar and somewhat gruesome historical detail during the threshing process, where grain was separated from the chaff. Roman farmers would often use animals, like oxen or donkeys, to trample the grain. This sounds simple enough, but occasionally, these animals would be muzzled to prevent them from eating the grain as they worked a practice even mentioned in the Bible. Thou shalt not muzzle the ox when he treadeth out the corn. So, imagine trying to work with hungry, perhaps agitated animals. ensuring they did their job without consuming your precious harvest. It adds another layer of challenge and potential conflict to an already grueling process. After the harvest comes the threshing, the process of separating the grain from the rest of the plant. This is another backbreaking task, often done on a flat, hardened area called a threshing floor. You might beat the stalks with flails, or, as mentioned, drive animals over them to loosen the grains. The air becomes thick with dust and chaff, irritating your eyes and lungs. Then comes the winnowing, throwing the threshed grain into the air so the wind can carry away the lighter chaff, leaving the heavier grain to fall to the ground. It's a messy, arduous, and crucial step. Historians still debate the exact yields and productivity of Roman agriculture, and how much surplus an average farmer could reliably produce after feeding their family and paying taxes. While some regions were more fertile than others, the consensus is that life was generally a precarious balance, with little margin for error. And any significant surplus was a rare and highly prized achievement. The storage of your grain is equally vital. You meticulously clean your granary. A simple, often rat-infested shed. Every effort is made to protect the stored grain from moisture, pests, and theft. This grain is your insurance, your future, your family's sustenance, until the next harvest. A single rodent infestation, a leaky roof, or a cunning thief could devastate your family's prospects. One small, fleeting moment of triumph might come when you finally see your granary filled, even if only partially. The sight of the piled grain, the result of your relentless effort, offers a profound sense of relief, a temporary respite from the constant gnawing fear of hunger. It's a tangible symbol of your resilience, your quiet victory against the elements. As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the western sky in deep purples and oranges, you finally lay down your tools. Your body is heavy, each muscle protesting the relentless work of the harvest. The exhaustion is profound, a deep weariness that seems to have settled into your very bones. You walk slowly back to your humble home, the silence of the fields broken only by the chirping of crickets. Your evening meal is eaten quickly, in the dim light of your flickering lamp. There's little energy for leisure, for storytelling, just the quiet satisfaction of a day's work done, and the immense, overwhelming need for rest. As the last embers of your cooking fire die down, you prepare for bed. The image of your stored grain, your lifeline, lingering in your mind, you lie down on your coarse sleeping mat. The familiar sounds of the Roman night filtering through the thin walls, the distant bark of a dog, the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, the chirping of crickets. Sleep claims you quickly, a heavy, dreamless oblivion born of sheer physical exhaustion. You drift into unconsciousness, knowing that with the first light of dawn, the unrelenting cycle of labor, forever tied to the demanding rhythm of the harvest and the enduring Roman earth, will begin anew.